Today I'm making version 1.1 of the 1880 Whitbread Porter. Now in the tasting video of the original porter, I said it was a very smooth drinker, it was nice chocolatey roasty notes, and it was perfect the way it was. I wasn't going to change it. Well, I lied. I am going to change it. I want a little bit more malty backbone, so I've made a tweak to the recipe, small one. I have changed the mash profile and I'm using a different yeast. So with that said, it's time to get off the tractor and start preparing my equipment. I got a hot liquor tank to fill, I've got grains to crush, and there's lots of things to do on brew day. Let's get going. Here's the grain bill for today's 1880 Whitbread Porter version 1.1. Getting some glare from the window. It uses 8.5 pounds of pale ale malt. I'm using Brewer's malt. 1.5 pounds of brown malt, 1 pound of black malt, and here's my change between this recipe and the first time I brewed it. I'm using 1 pound of roasted barley. So there's the recipe. Another change you can see I wrote down at the bottom there. I'm using Imperial Pub Ale A09, A09. And I am mashing at 100, I can't find it there, but I'm mashing at 154 degrees instead of 150 to 152. Trying to get a little more body. Just making sure I got my recirculation system all set up, and I'm not recirculating the mash right now. I'm trying to address an issue that I've had with the first 3 brews on this new electric system, and that is undershooting my mash temperature. No matter what I've done so far to transfer hot water from the hot liquor tank to the mash tun, whether it be through the recirculation port or whether underletting under the grains, I've always come up 4 or 5 degrees below my desired mash temperature, despite the calculations that both me and Brewsmith have made. So what I'm doing today is I filled this up with my strike water way before I got to strike temp. And I just wanted some hot water in here to preheat the mash tun, just as I would have done with my Coleman cooler system way back when. So I've got 170 degree water in the hot liquor tank, and right now this says 156. I'm trying to raise this up to my strike temp, which is set at 162. And I'm going to make sure that the water here, my strike, is at the desired temperature before I put the grains in this time. The last 3 times I kind of trusted the system, trusted that the probe was accurate, trusted that the control panel was giving me an accurate reading. Today, imagine this, I'm going to take actual readings with my digital pen here. Now my control panel says 155, 156, and this reads 155.3. So that's been right. The system has been right according to this. What that means is that just somewhere in the transferring of the liquid from here to here into the grains, I've just lost more heat than I expected. Few more degrees to get up to strike temp, then I'll dough in, I'll reset my mash temperature on the control panel to my 154 where I want to mash at, and then we'll start the timer and begin the mash process. Alright, my controller on the wall says I'm at 162. Just going to give this a good stir. And double check that with my javelin. And this says 161.6. It's bouncing between 161 and 162, so that's pretty accurate. Let me double check what my steps say, and my actual strike temp should be 161.6. So I should be ready to dough in at 161. Of course, as soon as I take it out, it goes down. 161.67. Trust me, that's what it says. All right. I'm going to turn the pump off. All right, I'm going to turn my pump off. Close my valve here. Close that one there. And let's dough in. Cut some of this mash paddle handle off. It was great when I was using converted kegels out in the open, but now I'm kind of under a light here. I keep banging my mash paddle on the light hood. I don't feel any dough balls. So let me hang up my mash paddle. And get my pen and see where I am on strike. $151, 151, 150, 151 and a half. All right, I'm a couple of degrees low. But not as bad as before. I might have had more volume in here than, yeah, I do, than I had planned, and that's going to bring down my temperature. All right, what we're looking at here is on the hot liquor tank side, the timer, mash timer at 59 minutes. The temperature is set to 168. 180 up there is what I had it set to while I was preheating that mash tun. I wanted to get that as warm as quickly as possible. That'll go down. Over on the mash tun side, my current mash temperature is bouncing between 151, 152, which is lower than I wanted to hit. I wanted to hit 154 on the nose right off the bat, but a couple of degrees is better than what I was missing it by before. So I've got the mash tun recirculating through the herms, and that'll raise up to 154. And the controller will hold that right there at right around 154. Let's take a look at this wort here. Got a real nice color going on. And we're recirculating currently at 153, 154 is our overall mash temperature, so we're doing pretty good on this brew today as far as mash goes, better than the first three. So the 60-minute mash is complete. What I'm doing now is raising the temperature in the mash tun to 168 to do a mash out. I'll raise the temp to 168, hold it there for 10-15 minutes. Right now I'm at 163. After the mash out, then I'll fly sparge into the boil kettle, and that's another step that I've been having issues with. I've always been a batch sparger, but this system is set up to be fly sparged, and I've been doing it too fast, way too fast. So I need to play with my flow rates on all the valves and everything. I just need to slow down my fly sparge. I said I was going to do three things different for this 1880 Whitbread Porter. One of them was the addition of roasted barley. The second was mashing at 154 instead of 150 to 152. And the third thing is using a new yeast, and I threw in a new yeast starter procedure. The technique is called shaken, not stirred. And I first read about this on Denny Conn's website at experimentalbrew.com in a blog called Old Dog New Tricks. Now normally what I would do is go to Beersmith, plug in my recipe. Beersmith would then tell me I need so many millions of yeast cells to ferment this recipe. And then I would play around with the size of the starter, the yeast that I'm using, and plug in some other numbers until I came up with the size of starter that's going to give me that cell count. Might be a liter, might be a liter and a half, might be 2 liters, but that's what I've been doing ever since I started making starters. This technique, shaken not stirred, doesn't really care so much about cell count. The actual technique was written about 4 years ago by a guy named Mark Vandita on the American Homebrew Association forum under the name S. Cerevisiae, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. But his theory is that he would rather have a smaller number of yeast cells that are ready to go to war. Those were his words. Instead of a large cell count that are tired and ready to take a nap. So instead of worrying about the size of the starter, and instead of putting on a stir plate for 24, 36, 48 hours or more before brew day, he makes a smaller starter, shakes the hell out of it. He says getting the foam in there is very important, but you seal the starter vessel after you put your starter medium in there and shake the hell out of it. I went for 2 minutes, got quite a workout. And you want to fill that vessel with as much foam as possible. Then you let it set for about 15 minutes, then you uncap it, pitch your yeast, put your airlock on, set it aside for only about 12 to 18 hours max. Mark says you want to pitch this into your wort at high krausen, at the starter's high krausen. I'll put a link to Denny's article on his website, and I'll put a link to Mark's write-up from 2015 where he explains it in great detail. A lot of information on this technique, and Mark really seems to know his stuff when it comes to yeast. And that's the technique that I'm using right now. I made this shaken not stirred starter in a gallon jug. I made, and this is important, the size of the vessel is quite important according to Mark. You want 3 times the dead space of the size of your starter. So I use a gallon jug, a 1 quart volume of starter, and that leaves the other 3 quarts empty. And I made that last night about 8 o'clock or so, so 12 hours. Should have been about the time I got started brewing this morning, but according to Denny, it's all good as long as you're within 12 to 18 hours, and I'll be within that parameter for sure. Right now what I'm doing is playing with all my valves, trying to adjust the flow of the sparge water and the wort into the boil kettle. Sure is a pretty color. I definitely have a nice slow trickle going in both vessels. What I'm going to do now is I'm almost over the boil coil, so I'm going to unplug the coil element on that HLT and move it over to the boil kettle. Make sure it's off, it's off. All right, it's time to check my pre-boil gravity. All right, my pre-boil sample has cooled down to a readable range. The maximum on this thermometer is 120. It's down to 115, and it's reading 1030. Temperature 115, using my conversion tool on Beersmith. Go. And that says 143. What is my pre-boil gravity supposed to be? 145. What does my refractometer say? About 12 to 13. Let me check that calibration tool. And that says 1047. So between 1042 and 1047. I'm in the ballpark. And my boil is going to begin soon, so I'm going to get my hops ready. Okay, the boil is almost done. About 15 minutes ago, I hooked up my counterflow chiller. I'm now recirculating through the chiller and then back up through the whirlpool arm. I wanted to give this about 15 minutes, the last 15 minutes of the boil, to sanitize the inside. I cleaned and washed and rinsed it out day before yesterday, but I want to get that sanitization done before I start filling up my buckets of wort that I'm going to take downstairs and transfer into my fermenter. There is the timer. I'm going to turn the boil off. I'm going to let the pump continue to run. I've got my garden hose in, connected here, and my garden hose out, snaked outside the garage and into the yard, where heavens knows our yards need more water. Alright, I finally got all the valves and the pumps in the right configuration, and I've been whirlpooling for about 15 minutes. Maybe longer. It's time now to get a little closer to the end of the brew day. I'm going to transfer my wort into some cleaned and sanitized buckets and carry them downstairs. Because I ferment downstairs, I'm in an unattached garage, I have to go across the patio and down the stairs. Carrying 6 gallons of wort in a fermenter is not something that I want to do. I can, but it's a pain, literally. And I don't have any fermentation set up inside the garage, so I gotta ferment in the basement. And I gotta carry my wort in manageable amounts. So for this batch, 2 5-gallon buckets filled about 3 gallons in each should be manageable and get us closer to fermentation. Remind me to take gravity readings. Don't know if I have enough light in here. 14 bricks. Let me run the numbers. Is that 1055? What does this say? $1054 at 70 degrees. And that's 1055 as well. Okay, so my gravity readings pretty much match. 14 bricks is 1055 on the refractometer. I've got 1053 at 68 degrees, and that's 1054. So I believe, if I remember correctly, that's about where I'm supposed to be with the original gravity on this. So now we have the gravity readings. Here's my shaken, not stirred yeast starter. I could decant that off. I think I will. And pitch this. Imperial Pub A09 using the shaken, not stirred pitching method. I made this starter up less than 24 hours ago. Less than 12 hours ago. You're supposed to pitch it at high Krausen, but I missed that by a few hours. But according to Denny Conn, that doesn't make much difference as long as you're within 18 or so. So, all right, it's all buttoned up. The blow-off tube is ready to do its thing. Temperature probe inside the fermenter reads 65.1, but I've got the pump inside the picnic cooler with a couple of frozen pop bottles. That'll be coming down soon. And I'll just keep a daily record of these fermentation temperatures and compare this batch with the first batch.